hit record. There you go. There we go. Excellent. Well, thank you everybody for being here. We're excited to have you today on the line with us. I am Leticia Emmy. I am joined by my colleagues in the IRIS Plus and IMM team. Kelly McCarthy, Kevin Dorio, and Lisa Glasgow are here with us as well. And we are excited to be here with you. Oops, wait, everybody, because otherwise we'll get echo. There we go. We're excited to be here with you. We still have echo with a few other folks. Sorry. Okay, hopefully we're good now. We're excited to be here with you to share about a new functionality or feature that we are developing on IRIS Plus, which is building on a lot of the feedback that we got from you over the last few years. So we'll start with a little context setting in terms of where we are on IRIS Plus and the market need that we've been hearing and has been informing the development of the list. And then we'll dive into a little bit more about the list and what will enable you to do. We'll talk about early access that we'll give to all of you investors in the working group, and then we'll open up to discussion. We don't have a whole lot of content today. What we want to do really is give you a good preview of what this new feature is going to be, and then just open up to discussion with you all. So it's aimed to be a very interactive session. In the beginning, I'm going to keep you all muted just to preserve audio quality while I go through the slides. But then as we open up to discussion, we'd love to hear from all of you. So to that end, also, please, any thoughts, questions that you have as we go through the slides, feel free to put them on the chat box, and then we'll open up to discussion, if that sounds good. Great. So I see we have a few more on the line, and we should all be muted, so we should be good to go. The other thing, before I forget, so as I said, we are recording the session. We'll post it on the website together with the slides for any other colleagues that might not be able to join today. We are keeping this session just to investors today, even though the list will be publicly available to anybody and everybody interested. Investors are the main audience, and you'll very soon understand how and why. So we wanted to get your feedback first. And so this is why we're keeping this session just to investors. So let's get started. So as you all know, IRIS Plus is the generally accepted system to measure, manage, and optimize impact, and it really helps investors go from their goals into results. In 2019, we launched the first phase, which is the IRIS Plus system that you know, which was aimed to help simplify your IMM approach. So as a system, IRIS Plus provides you with several different key features, from the catalog of metrics that you've known for many years to the core metric sets, which are the short sets of metrics by theme, practical guidance, the built-in evidence base, and the alignment to other standards. And so in this way, what IRIS Plus has been helping you do is leverage best practices and research to set up your IMM framework, identify metrics and strategies that match your goals. Now, as we move into, this has been our first phase, if you will, and now what we're talking about is the second phase of IRIS Plus that we'll be releasing this year, that is in regards to the IRIS Plus list, which is in alpha version. And the objective of the list is to provide more transparency in the market and help you get recognized for the good work that you do and help find other investors. So we'll talk a lot more about what this is and it entails, but just so you know, today we're going to be talking about the second phase, which is the IRIS Plus list. So where we are in terms of adoption and why this matters, and you'll understand in a minute, but since we've launched IRIS Plus, we've been delighted to see the adoption of IRIS Plus grow all around the world. We have about 163,000 visitors to IRIS Plus from all over the world, about 17,000 unique users, representing about 10,000 unique organizations. And this is both investors and enterprises, as well as also others, advisors, consultants, academics, researchers, and whatnot. And when we look at who is using IRIS Plus, we see that about 76% of the top investors, when we calculate top investors by AUM, are using IRIS Plus, and about 88% of HIPSO DFIs use IRIS Plus. And so we know that already we have quite a significant portion of the impact investing space represented in IRIS Plus. And so the list would allow all of you who are already using IRIS Plus, get credit for a lot of what you're doing, and then also invite others to join, good practices in IMM and help raise the bar in practice and transparency. So since we launched IRIS Plus about 2 years ago, we've been hearing a lot of feedback from the market that, just for the sake of clarity, we're going to break it down into 3 different buckets, if you will. I'd say, the first type of feedback we get, the first bucket would be under what we can call, who's doing what. And so, for example, I recently had a conversation with a pension fund who's interested in getting into investing for impact, and they were saying, we want to invest in, we want to get into impact investing, but we don't have a way to differentiate between asset managers in the space. Or we typically also get, questions from, investors saying, whether it's to us or to the research team in response to, for example, the annual survey, saying, can you help me understand, who else is investing in a particular region? For example, who else is investing in early stage, in healthcare? Or, who, can you help me understand what the total AUM of investors in this specific region? Also falls, recognizing that impact base left a big gap and that now it's harder to know, who's doing what. So that would be, the first type of feedback that we get quite a bit would be under the who's doing what. The second type of feedback we get quite a bit is around, how do others integrate impact measurement management into their practice? And also, how can they get recognized for following good practices? So, for those of you who are familiar with our State of IMM survey that we've done, in 2017 and 2019, we get a lot of questions related to that practice. So, for example, what percentage typically of their budgets investors, typically allocate to IMM activities? How do other investors set impact targets? And then more in terms of, recognizing practice, we've been asked quite a bit, is there any type of seal or any type of way to recognize, those who are aligning to industry standards and best practices and whatnot. And the third type of feedback that we get quite a bit, and I'm sure this resonates with all of you, is, are we moving the needle? It's recognizing and understanding that, while investors are able to compare the performance of their investments within their own portfolio, there isn't yet a way to know how your performance compares to that of others, which talks about, the need for a benchmark that, many of you know, at the GIIN we've been working towards. And so we've been hearing, people say we're operating in the dark. We really have no way to know if what we're doing is better or worse than others. And also, it is really difficult for us to really be able to compare on the basis of impact. So hearing to these different needs from the market that seem to be very clear on these 3 different topics, is that we are developing the list to help answer these questions. And so imagine having, a feature in IRIS Plus that helps you, show who you are and what you do, how you do it, and what your results are, all in one place, and get credit for that. So this is what the list will help you do. We're going to release the list in 3 different phases, 1, 2, and 3. The first one, this is what you see on the screen. So the first one, it will be the profile phase, which will help answer, those questions about, who you are and what you do. So this phase will help you feature your organization, show who you are, and also help you, find others and see who others are and what they're doing. On a second phase that will come later this year, we'll focus on practice. So here you'll be able to get credit for what you do, for your practices that you integrate, For those of you familiar with, our, again, State of IMM survey, you can imagine, things that start to get more into not just what you do, what is your AUM or where you're investing, but also how you're doing it. So here's where the objective is to help you get recognized for your hard work. And then a third phase that we'll release next year, which will be focused on performance. And so helping you understand how your results compare to others. And different peers, and being able to dynamically see differences depending on how you compare yourself to different peer groups, again, and helping you then in this way benchmark your performance. So as hopefully this is clear, and you can see these three phases aim to solve for the three big buckets of needs that we hear from you, or we've been hearing from you for the last 2 years. So how are we going to be doing this? Well, we are planning on leveraging a lot of the data that we already have and that it's already out there. So the GIIN has over 10 years of data, whether if you or your organization contributed to the annual Impact Investor Survey, or to the State of IMM survey, or to any of the impact performance studies that we've done. There's a lot of data that we already have from organizations, also whether it was from the IRIS registry, from IRIS Plus, there's a lot of information that comes in those accounts. So there's a lot of information that we have from you already, so that you don't have to worry about, oh wait, I already gave the GIIN a lot of information. Are you going to be asking me again for the same type of information? We are not going to be asking you again to complete information that we already have from your organization. And we also have a lot of experience and assets in understanding how to use this data. But then we also know that it's not just the data that we might have at the GIIN, but that we also know that there's a lot of data that is either publicly available or that you have provided to other data sources. And so we're looking at partnering with other data sources and data platforms to be able to harmonize and make this leverage a lot of the information you've already provided. So two of the organizations that we've been in conversations with include Tonic Tracer, and I'm happy to see Adam and Dario here on the line, and Impact Classification System, or ICS. And then there's a number of others that we are exploring with as well. It's just mentioning these two because they're the ones that we have been in more active conversations. But again, the idea here is to leverage a lot of the information that is out there. Let me make sure I'll mute everybody. A lot of information that exists there, so that it makes your job a lot easier in terms of showing who you are and what you do, so that you don't have to start from scratch, and you would just maybe come in and update your information. And I'll show you some screens, so this will all be a lot more clear as we see some screens of what it will look like. The other thing that is important to mention, and is one of the big drivers of the list is to recognize transparency. As you all know, at the GIIN, we're committed in helping the market scale, but scale with integrity. And a key part of that is having more transparency. And we've heard also from the market in many of the surveys that we do that this is quite a challenge. And so the list will help encourage more transparency in the market. And one of the ways where we plan to incentivize that is also by offering a badge. And so each of the phases, I mentioned there was going to be 3 different phases: profile, practice, and performance. Each of the phases will give organizations that are part of the list an ability to earn a badge, if you will, or different sections of the badge. And this badge will show the organizations that are more transparent in sharing their profile, practice, and performance. So for now and for today, we'll focus on profile phase, which is the first phase, which is the one we're working on, and we plan to launch this summer. But then the other phases we'll talk about later on, but those will also be associated with the badge. So a little bit of how we've been doing this as well. I mentioned that we've been working on this for quite a long time. So I think many of you are going to recognize these conversations. We didn't have the name of the list back then, but we've been having these conversations pretty much since we launched IRIS Plus in May of 2019. After we launched IRIS Plus, we had a number of conversations with what used to be the IRIS registry users, with IRIS committee members and with the working group about, what should we do. At the time we were thinking, well, what should we do with the IRIS registry? Should we evolve it? Should we relaunch it? What should it look like? And so we had a lot of conversations that have informed the development of the need and help us understand really what was needed and what is needed at this time. And so we've also done a lot of one-on-one calls and come to the working group. We didn't have the name of the list, but we've been talking about this for about 2 years. And then at the same time, as you know, the ongoing development of IRIS Plus, whether that's in, development of themes or the impact performance studies and the methodology for standardizing and comparing impact performance are all helping also power what the list will offer. I'm realizing that my animation on this slide is not good, so I apologize for that. But where we are now is in the development of the phase 1 of the list, which is what I just mentioned. We have a pilot with 20 investor organizations that we've been running that we launched in March 31st, which is informing in detail a lot of what's going into this phase 1. And I can share more about those organizations and what they're doing later. But also we want to work with you today what we wanted to do is share where we are and get your feedback so that we also have the opportunity to bring your feedback into the development of the list. And we will give the IRIS Plus working group also an early access to the list. The plan is to release the first phase, this profile phase, this summer. But before we do so, we'll work with you all for an early release so that we give you the opportunity to feature your organization how you want it to be featured before anybody else. And then, as I mentioned, phases 2 and 3 will be launched, either phase 2 later this year, phase 3 next year, sorry. So a little sneak peek. Wanted to show you some screens. Before I show you any screens, let me say this is what we are going to share. It's an alpha version. It is very early. And what we're doing with the pilot that we're running with these 20 organizations is getting their feedback and getting the feedback from you all today as well. And then rapidly incorporating a lot of the feedback that we have to make sure that the list addresses really your most important needs. So what you see here is just an early, it's an early prototype. So don't get fixed to anything you see, but it will give you a sense of what we're talking about a little bit more. I think it will help crystallize a lot of the concepts that we're talking about. So we talked about phase 1, and phase 1 being the profile and where you can feature your organization and be seen or discovered, if you will, by other investors, as well as find others. And so imagine if you had, there's going to be a directory, which will be part of the, the list will be one of the features where you can, search and find different organizations. And then let's say you're interested in one and you can click on that organization and see more. So if you imagine that this is your organization, this is of course a fictional example. What the list will give you, for example, when you click on a profile is, a quick snapshot of the organization. So at the top, you'll see their name, their logo, a little description, their headquarters. And then there's going to be 2 tabs of information, or at least this is what it looks like now, but just to get a sense of what kind of data and information we're showing. At first you get an overview of the organization. So getting a snapshot, really quickly about, their total assets under management, how is that, AUM split between direct investments and indirect investments? How is it split by asset classes? What are the allocations by sector of the organization? And then also by geography? What are the SDGs and the impact categories and themes that the organization is aligning to? And how many funds, if we think about, for example, fund manager, how many funds this organization manages. And then on the next, other set of information, in this case, it's a next tab. I don't know exactly if it would look like tabs, but just, so you first get an overview, and then if you dig in a little more, you'll be able to get a sense of the investment of the organization. And so in this case, in this fictional example we have here, we have an organization which is managing 5 funds. And in this case, it doesn't have any direct investments, but you could imagine, there's every profile will be different. And so you might have more or less funds, and you can also mention your direct investments. But for the interest of this example, in this case, this organization has, you can see, has several funds. I know that image is not very big, but you can see that some funds have more, which are the tiles, have more icons than others. And so, for example, quickly you could see that some of them have the badge. This is the badge that we were sharing before or talking about before, or some of them already are aligned to specific, SDGs or impact themes that you might be interested in, and some might not. And so the ones that might not is maybe because they might not be, impact related, or maybe the organization didn't complete the information of that fund. And when you click on it, on each fund, you'll be able to get, a better sense of, what is that fund investing for. And so, some of the typical financial information that you might, imagine, a lot of the information we used to have an impact base in the sense in terms of, for example, the AUM, the target raise, the maximum ticket size and minimum ticket size, the target financial return and whatnot, allocation again by sector and geography. And then also, moving on a little bit, something that we've heard a lot from the market is understanding how they're using IRIS Plus. So, for example, what different, impact categories and themes and core metric sets they're using, as well as how they are aligning to industry standards and principles. So, being able to, see that right away, whether if you think again, there's two ways of seeing these. There's, how you will display your organization and what you want others to see, as well as what you'll be able to find of others. So wrapping up, and as I said, not a whole lot of content. The idea is just to give you a quick view on what this is and get your feedback. The list, the aim of the list is to help you discover the world's most impactful investors and impact companies they invest in, so that you can find fund investors and innovative impact-focused companies. You can identify and follow trends and best practices. You can be recognized for your hard work, and you can improve decision-making. I mentioned also before that we want to give early access to the investors in the working group. So before we go live this summer, we'll come to you to work with you so that you can update your profile before it goes live. I also mentioned that we're leveraging a lot of the information we already have of you. So if you imagine, the information, for example, here at an organizational level, any information that we already have, we're going to pre-populate on your profile. And then we'll come to you and we'll say, here's your pre-populated profile with the information that we already have. Would you like to update it and check it? And then you get the chance to update it, check it, add any other information that we might not have. And then we'll do all of that before we release to the market. And so in this sense, we want to recognize that a lot of you have been working with us for 2 years, some newer, some from the get-go, but give you that first chance to, when we release this to the market, have a fully complete profile. So that's the early access that we want to work on with you, and we'll provide more details as we get there, but that will probably be sometime this summer. So with that, I would love to open to discussion. We have some questions for you, and then we also want to hear your questions. Let me see. Okay. Chat. I'm going to open the chat to make sure we'll have it. Okay, excellent. So I'm going to pose some questions for you, and then please start sending any other questions. We are a group of 30, so I think we're good to, we're good size for also, if you would like to, if you prefer to unmute your mic and just ask a question, feel free to do so. But I'd like to get some overall reactions from you in terms of the list. If this is hitting the nail in terms of some of the needs that you have been expressing to us as well. How do you envision using the list? What are some of the key must-haves for you for the list? As well as what are things that maybe the list should not do or avoid. So I'll give you a couple minutes to think about this, and then please either you can type your reactions in the chat box, or also feel free to unmute yourself. And if you don't know how to do that, let me know and I'll unmute you. But we'd love to hear from you.
Quick question. So is this form already live that you can fill in, or is it going to still come?
Narina, no, it is not live yet. It's in development. It will be live this summer. But what I was saying is that before it's live and open to the public, we'll come to you all first with your profile. So you get a chance to update your profile before and share any information you want to share before it is live for anybody to see. But what we wanted to do, what we wanted to do today is recognizing that, you all are part of the IRIS Plus working group. You help inform the development of the working group. So we wanted to come to you to tell you where we are on this, which is building on a lot of the conversations that we've had over the last 2 years, show you something a little more concrete, get your reactions on times that we can incorporate. And then by the time we launch, we'll come back to you before we release to the market.
And is the idea that it will effectively replace the impact base?
So impact base is not, you might know, but impact base is not available anymore. So it doesn't aim to replace impact base because it will offer a lot of things that impact base did not offer, but it will, I think the short answer will be, it will help solve for the gap that impact base left and answer a lot of the questions that impact base was helping answer. But it will be broader because impact base did not get to details of practice, for example, or performance. And impact base was also just for fund managers, whereas the list will aim to map the entire investment space. So it will not be just fund managers or asset managers. It will also include, asset owners, and eventually and over time also we'll start linking also to the companies that investors are investing in. So it'll be broader than impact base.
Yeah, I think it's good. It sounds positive. I mean, indeed, because I remember it was like really a long time ago since we even looked at the impact base. So I guess that must be the reason that it's just been discontinued. So I think it's good to have a replacement and to have a place which is a more comprehensive overview of all impact investors. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Narina, for your reaction.
One of the things.
Yes. Go ahead.
So, one of the things that for us at Global Partnerships would be valuable is to have the sectors in which investors are working, because for example, as we are planning to go into more cutting edge topics, and we would like to see other investors that have gone or have started doing investments in that area, it'll be important for us to know who are the peers working in those areas and maybe establish connections with them and see how we could improve our measurement of those areas. So these would be very helpful for us in that sense.
Excellent. That's great to know. And yes, so you will be able to filter by sectors. Absolutely.
Hi, this is Lillian from RSA Partners. Echo a good initiative. Good to have such a database. My question was around, would there be any kind of checking or auditing process from this?
That is a great question and something we've been thinking about quite a bit. So it is not our role at the GIIN to be verifiers of information. There are other third parties that provide that service way better than we can or we have the bandwidth to. But the plan is to, this is small in one of our earlier screens, but as you show, so as an organization shows, different, let's say, alignments to, standards, principles, and whatnot, also be able to highlight whether they have third-party verification. And so you'll be able to see if a profile of an organization has any type of verification or if everything, what they have is self-disclosed. So while we are not providing the verification ourselves, we do want to help provide transparency in terms of those who are third-party verified.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
A question from me, Jan. I'm based in Paris, and we have an impact fund for Europe and Asia, and we're working with the European Commission on the regulator on the taxonomy, so the different rules for Europe. And we see there is a nice move from everyone to try to have things more clear and more similar, I would say. Is there any effort from your side using this project to try to make it comparable in the different main areas, I would say, and main referentials? You see what I mean?
Yeah. So, Jan, are you referring, for example, to aligning to some of the EU taxonomy requirements, for example, around like what percentage of your, AUM is under like Article 6?
Yeah. For instance, and we keep having questions from LPs or companies from the portfolio. They are kind of lost between all the different network and referentials. And most of us, most of the investors, we use your referential, we also have to deal with others. And in terms of wording and in terms of positioning, I think things could be more aligned. And I don't know if you plan to work on that. It's a little bit on the side of what you say today, but I think when you produce new things that make things public and give opportunity for transparency, and I think it's very positive, it does create a standard. And if the standard goes to the same direction as others, it makes our life more easy. That's my point.
Thank you. That's great feedback. And actually, what I would love then maybe, I can follow up with you separately, but show you some of the language that we're using in some of these early screens, and you can tell us also what is aligned already and what is not. One of the things that we are already considering is, as I was mentioning, a partnership, a strategic partnership with the impact classification system, who are, I think, aligned not only in the classifications of, A, B, and C, but also aligned to Article 6, 8, and 9. So that is something that we are already considering. But in terms of, reference to other language, it will be helpful, really helpful to get your feedback. So if that's okay, I'll follow up with you separately.
Yeah, please. We'll be happy to do it with you.
Great. I also see a message from somebody that says, Robert, you say, perhaps impact investors should be able to indicate future directions they're interested in addition to what they are already engaged in. That's interesting. Thank you, Robert. Feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like to say a little bit more. And when you say directions, do you mean in terms of sectors, SDG themes, or geographies? Would you like to tell us a little bit more what you're thinking?
I think that any future direction would be relevant, particularly in terms of gauging where the impact investment community is going, in addition to looking at what it is already engaged in. What are the emerging issues that impact investors are looking at? This database could really help gauge that movement and perhaps galvanize movement into new issues that are really just emerging.
That's a great point. And in terms of, again, to be a little more specific, so particularly, what things would you want investors to start flagging? So would it be related to thematic or like themes or sectors or SDGs or type of capital, whether it's, I don't know, or geographies? What certain metrics or indicators? Can you elaborate a little bit more in terms of how would you break that down?
Wow, I'd really have to think about that. But oftentimes, you have particularly international development issues that are emerging, particularly in terms of public health, oftentimes in terms of job creation. in environmental issues. An impact investor that is mostly involved, for example, in public health, might be looking to take a more proactive direction in looking at investing in environmental impacts that are that prevent these public health issues from emerging to begin with. That's just a thought right off the top of my head. But I think that this could give a space for impact investors to kind of scratch their heads and think, well, what else could we do as opposed to what we're already doing? Where else might we go? What might our next step be as we engage in this world? I think that might be very handy.
Yeah, I really like that. One thing also to say, Robert, I wonder, we are a little bit side note, but also, you know, the way we develop thematic content for IRIS Plus. And so, for example, we recently launched, you know, the themes of quality jobs, climate change mitigation, and WASH. We're now working on sustainable agriculture, kicking off, I think, yesterday, biodiversity, clean energy, and we really work, we partner with an expert organization, but then we work with a group of stakeholders to help inform that work. So we can follow up with you separately, but wonder if you'd like to be involved in some of the thematic work that we are working on based on what you're saying.
I would be delighted and honored.
Wonderful. We'll follow up with you after then. Great. I see a question from Dario. Thank you for the overview. Very helpful. I have two questions related to each other. Okay. One is, does the organization differentiate a fund managed as a general partner from a fund invested as a limited partner? And is it possible to, if possible, to differentiate the two? Is it possible to see who else is invested in a fund as a limited partner? So that's, thank you, Dario, for asking that. So far, we have not necessarily called them, like labeled them LPs and GPs. We have been following the taxonomy that we have, an internal GIIN taxonomy. But that would help you quickly understand, I believe, if somebody's a GP or an LP. And yes, people have asked your question. Some of the feedback we're getting from the pilot is that it is very important to see who else is invested in that fund. So the idea is that when you see a fund, you'll be able to see who else is invested in the fund, as well as which are, the companies that that fund is invested in. And please feel free to unmute yourself and add anything else that I might have missed. Excellent. Any other thoughts or questions? Anything that, so the other thing, so we're talking about, oh, okay, I'll save my question. I think somebody was about to come in, but come in and I'll save my question for after. No? Okay, I'll keep going. So what we wanted to hear from you was overall reactions, and happy to hear that this is resonating. Also, what are things that will be, make sure that we need to consider, must-haves, make it valuable. We've heard some of that, which is super interesting too. Are there any things that you would not want it to have, for example, or we should avoid that wouldn't be important to you? And if you can't think of any, that's okay. We have a quiet group today, I have to say. Okay, I have another message from Carter that says, I can see elements would be useful for evaluators who are assisting investors. What are your thoughts on how this could be used, especially for evaluators contracted by investors? Thank you, Carter. That is a really good question. So the list will feature investor organizations, and like we said, not just fund managers, but the entire space, and it will link also to the companies they're investing in. That said, well, the organizations included in the list are investors. We believe very strongly that the list itself will be used by more than just investors. So we can absolutely see how evaluators would be able to use the list as well as others. And some of what we've been hearing also from people in the pilot, this is more from an investor perspective, but being able to see identify for GP, identify LPs and what they're looking for. If you're an LP, identify GPs, but also identify in cases of organizations looking for somebody to co-invest, being able to identify partners. Kelly, can I show the screen again? Yes. There were a couple of screens, so I don't know which one specifically you wanted to see, but this is the kind of like the quick snapshot overview of the organization. This is understanding a little bit more about their investments and how many funds they have, whether they have a batch or not, and their direct investments. And then this is when you click into a fund and then getting more details about the fund itself. And again, what we're showing here, this is just phase 1, which is the profile phase. When you imagine phase 2 and phase 3 will be adding information to this profile. So imagine that now you're looking at a fund, and in phase 2, then you start seeing, and we'll talk as we release and we get ready to inform those phases. We'll talk more about what is public information that everybody sees versus what's information that you just see yourself about your organization, but be able to see details about the practice of the organization and how that practice compares to peers, for example, and being able to dynamically play with different peer groupings depending on how you compare yourself to others. And then when we release performance, being able to see how your results compare to peers and really understanding at the end of the day what are the drivers of impact performance, so that we can all make better decisions and help allocate more capital towards impact and reallocate in a more efficient way. So Kelly, is this, I don't know which screen you are referring to, but let me know if you have any specific questions. Okay. We have a quiet group, so I'm going to keep moving, but please, any other thoughts or questions, feel free to unmute yourself or use the chat.
Leticia, I do have a question. For impact measurement and impact data, are you thinking of consolidating them at what level, like at the organization level, at the fund or company level? So how will they be rolled up if you already have decided that?
You mean for the analysis of impact performance?
Yes.
So the way, and so that is also, this it will have one interface, which is the list, but which really is bringing together a lot of the work of the GIIN in different areas. So this is where we are, all the work we've been doing on impact performance studies and on the methodology for standardizing and comparing impact performance also comes into play to enable the analysis of impact performance. The way we've done it until now is that the data is collected at the company level. That said, we also envision, being able to do and run analysis at a fund level later on. But in the beginning, it'll probably be at the investment level.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And Kelly, I see you saying, I was thinking whether there's a section to separate the type of assets, for example, in early stage companies and whatnot. That's interesting. That's not something we have so far. Would you like to share a little more? Feel free to unmute yourself if you want. no big deal. I don't need to put you on the spot if you don't want to.
Sorry, just not a good time to unmute. But I was just thinking about, I missed sort of the first half of the meeting because of other things I was doing, but I was just thinking about if this meeting is specific to the racial equity theme as well, or is this something separate?
Oh, okay. Sorry. No, this is something separate. So racial equity, and actually I forgot to mention that was one of the things that's one of the things we're developing. So thank you for saying that. No, this is separate. So we do have different sessions that we bring to the working group and to the market for different things. So we are currently working on the development of the racial equity theme. That is content. This is a feature of IRIS Plus that is, it will, so for example, if you're an investor investing in racial equity, you'll be able to show that. And also we actually have received feedback about including some DI stats of funds and investors in their profile. But no, those are different conversations. So happy to catch you up on the racial equity conversation separately. And my colleague Lisa, who's on the line, is leading that work. So she can also follow up with you separately.
Got it. Thank you. Yeah, I was just thinking it would make sense to see the different, I guess you do, it seems like you do have a separate section for asset class, right? Yeah. So depending on what the different labels are, it will be interesting to see the different impacts that the different asset class would have.
Yes. So, and that is when you start, and I think this is what I am personally super excited about, is being able to, I think the first phase, when you look at this, it's, it's a little more, not that revolutionary. I mean, the amazing value of it is bringing it all into one place in a way that it really doesn't exist. But when you think about practice and performance and being able to, compare yourself and, do it that dynamically, and whether it's by, other peers investing in the same type of asset class, or whether it's other peers in different geographies, and then really letting the user, play in terms of how you define your peer group, and then how does that change the results, for example, of the practice of others or the performance of others.
Thank you.
Great. I'll keep us moving, but again, any other thoughts or questions, please jump in. So our next steps is that we are continuing the pilot effort to inform and test the list. As I mentioned, we have 20 organizations that are working with us in a very hands-on way, providing a lot of feedback and testing the list. And we selected this group to be, very representative of the investor space. So we have asset owners, whether it's, DFIs and foundations, and we have asset managers of different sizes, geographies of focus and types, just to make sure that we can get a good representative group, and the list really answers the needs of all of them. And as I mentioned today, we are going to come to you all, investors in the working group, to work on updating your profile before it goes live. So there will be more details of that coming. And the plan is to release phase 1 this summer. And then phase 2, which will be practice by the end of the year, and phase 3, looking at performance next year. So this will be an ongoing development, which is not a surprise. You're all familiar with that, with our IRIS Plus thematic development. And again, today we wanted to share where we are, get your feedback. This has been very valuable. Thank you. We'll follow up with some of you separately. If you have any other comments or questions, I'm happy to stay on the line for a couple more minutes and answer any other questions. But thank you. Hopefully we answered your questions. And if not, I'm happy to pick up after the offline or in the next few minutes. I'll stay on the line a few more minutes. Thank you all.